Hello and welcome to another look at animations. This time we're looking at an animation that is not on my YouTube channel, but this is just a short looping animation I made for fun, basically, just for myself, for social media, for Reddit, essentially. I'm actually a big proponent, if you're an animator that's still learning and want to practice, to focus on these shorter term animations, because at least for me, I've found that they're much easier to focus on. You focus on quality rather than quantity. Animations that are minutes long can be very overwhelming once you realize how many drawings it's going to take. In this, you can just focus on the very simple movements, very simple scene. You can see the whole timeline in one go. It's not that intimidating. So what are we doing in this video? We're just going to go through, there's a lot of things happening in this animation, of course, and I'm just going to break it all down and go through kind of how I made the different things and kind of what I do just in the process of making an animation. So as I'm sure you noticed, we have this wizard here headbanging with his staff, which we'll get to in a second, but actually the first thing I want to point out is actually not that exciting. It's the this black frame around the animation here, and this is the first thing I do whenever I make any animation. So this passepartout, there's a fancy word for you, basically just a frame, just blocks it out. Without that, we get some edges and things bleeding out of the frame, and it's just more difficult. You see the shadow here. It's more difficult to get a sense of what your animation looks like, so getting that out of the way from the get-go is just really nice. So I guess we'll start on the start of the show here, this wizard. So what do you do when you make an animation like this and you have movements in mind? What I love to do, it's called key poses basically. You focus on the key poses and then work your way in between them. So for example, the wizard isn't, if you just focus on his body doesn't move too much. He's just moving his arms here. So this is one key pose. Then the second key pose I would draw would be here. Okay, and again, his body doesn't move much, it's just his hands. And then afterwards, I would go back and fill in the in-between frames between each one. So for example, this might be the middle point of this pose and this pose. So I do that, and then I would do the middle points of those middle points, and so on and so forth. And that's just one of many techniques in animation. Key poses, I find it really helpful for giving yourself a foundation to work with. Again, we have this pose, and we have this pose, which is not one single pose necessarily. But normally what I'll do is I'll focus on the first pose in the series of images, which would be here. And again, you just make some in-betweens. And again, I actually have an animation where he jumps up and strikes a cool pose at the end. And I wound up cutting that out, but same concept. You have the first pose, you have the second pose, and then you do your in-betweens. There's an in-between, and that's just kind of what it looks like with the in-betweens put in. So if you'll notice, a lot of these frames are just single frames here for all these in-between poses, and you don't have to do this. This is a bit excessive, I admit. Normally I do animate on the twos instead, which would be, these frames here, basically just every other frame. But in this instance, with a shorter animation, I just wanted to make it look really fluid. And but you can do either one. I mean, do it and see what it looks like. You can change it from twos to ones to threes, whatever. Now the staff and what the hands are doing. So this hand here, the one with the fingers, is this it? Yeah, this is it. It's actually just basically stapled onto the staff itself right here. So this is a whole animation for the fingers on the staff. And this was actually pretty difficult. Like I had to take a couple passes at it. A couple of small smears, which smears are basically just movement. You have these like exciting little lines here, and you can kind of like smear the image to emphasize your movement. And I wanted to be careful not to have all of his fingers down at once and also loop it. So that takes 6 frames total. And I just nailed that right onto his staff. And wherever the staff goes, the hand follows. And once you watch the animation back, you will see that this hand is always in the exact same spot in relation to the staff. So the arms are the same concept. It's just all about key poses. So here it's all the way to the left. Then we go all the way to the right. And those are your 2 key poses. And actually, let me see if I can find it. So we get the frames exactly. There they are. And the true in-betweens are just this big smear. There's really only one frame of in-between for each one. And they're both pretty aggressive smears. And all the other frames are kind of variations of the same drawing. And you can see like here it's all the way to the left, and here it's still all the way to the left, but it's all being kind of dragged a little bit in the way it's about to move. And then it moves that way. So it kind of gives it that illusion of momentum. Things don't start or stop on a dime in nature. So you kind of have that, a little bit of a rev up before it actually moves. And I'm a big fan of smears. I'm always like, if you're not sure of how to do them or, what, just try it. It's a lot of fun. It always like, it usually helps movements a lot. Like in this hat, you see a very simple smear going on. just a few lines, and the connecting line of the outline is not there, and instead it's kind of this wavy color going on, and we have it going the other way as well a couple times. So pretty simple, but gets the job done. You can smear all sorts of ways. You can look up on Google Images for smears, and you'll find a lot of examples by people who really know what they're doing. Definitely recommend that. And same with his strumming hand here when he goes down. Very simple like smear that I use for both the up and the down. Up, down, it uses the same exact image. And I designed the smear to kind of accommodate that. The only other thing I'll say about this character before we get into the background is the coloring. The coloring is pretty interesting. It's something I want to experiment with more going forward. So at least for me, like my first instinct when I do highlights or shadows or anything is just use the same color. If you use Photoshop or any kind of program really, you know about the blending modes. That's a very easy way to do shadows and highlights and all that good stuff. So just to give an example of those blending modes real quick, I made 3 squares here, the same color as his robe. And so for shadows, you would take this and make it multiply, for example. And that'll give you a very nice, as I put it over that robe color there, gives you a very nice, very easy shadow color. And the same thing with highlights, you can put it on screen. And now it lightens whatever is underneath it. So that's a very like easy way of doing shadows. And that's kind of what I did for the shadows here. As you can see, it's just a darker color of the blue, more or less. But the highlights I went with yellow, which is weird. I mean, that's weird. You know, his robes are not yellow. But I think that kind of emphasis really emphasizes the lighting. And you can see it goes on his beard as well. The light is so strong from his window that it's actually bathing his robe in literal yellow sunlight. And I mean, I colored this in. I made this character before the room was even here, but I guess like my natural, whenever I draw, like naturally, I kind of put the light source in the upper left. And I just wanted to try like a different color highlight. So there you are. It works out well. And I designed the room around that lighting of the character, of course. And again, you can kind of see it with the shadow on his face. That is not really his face color. That's actually like a purple color, as you can see right here. So just play around with different colors like that. And I think it definitely makes your drawings, your animations, your whatever, pop out a little more. And it's definitely something I want to play around with more as well. Okay, back to business here. We have lots of animations to look at. Might not look at them all necessarily, but I do want to point out the ones that use different techniques and stuff, and just kind of show you what I did. So first, let's look at the this whatever this is. So this is probably the one thing in this animation that I would redo if I could. This blob kind of punches itself in the head. It's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. I was inspired by Jamie R, who's an extremely talented animator on YouTube. Makes very disgusting and very weird, kind of very like blobby, morphing, gross. If you watch his video, you'll see what I mean. That's kind of what I was going for here, and I just really didn't hit the mark at all. It turned into something else. It's turned into something else that's kind of interesting, but it's not really, not really Jamie R. Now this I did animate on the 2s, and that's all it is. And you can see this is only from one side, and actually what I did, instead of doing the whole animation, I just looped it basically, but flipped it on the second loop. So it plays once normally and then once mirrored to give it that kind of back and forth motion. And as for the column here, just kind of a helix. It's just kind of a helix going up. So one thing that can come up a lot in animation, as you watch me struggle to use the pen tool here, is this kind of zigzag pattern. And if you're not really sure of how to like animate that, which I mean, it can be very tricky sometimes. Draw this like little zigzag thing. You don't have to do this, which I'm failing at miserably, but just draw like a little zigzag or something, because that's the line it's basically going to be following. And then if on another layer you tween that, for example, like this, let's move it, not like that, let's move it up, create a tween, we will see that shape roughly follow the line. And so you can kind of use that to guide yourself. Don't be afraid to use references, because you need to. Animation's really hard. It's hard enough as it is. Please use references. It helps a lot, I promise. And little tricks like this help as well. So this is good for like waving flags. It's good for snakes. It's good for anything that can kind of wiggle and wave and move, or a double helix kind of thing like this. So the bottles, let's look at the bottles real quick, and they're all separate. So that's a little bit interesting. They all use they're all pretty simple, honestly. The smoke here is nothing special. I literally, made one thing and basically repeated it 3 times. So you'll see it's the same smoke bubble going up and up and up. And I animated this on the 3s, which at 24 frames per second here is you know, kind of choppy, but it's small. It's in the background. I knew I could get away with that. And really, smoke does have a more. It doesn't move quickly. It doesn't move suddenly. So smoke, I think you can especially get away with slightly choppier animation. And you'll notice too, it's not like the smoke is coming out of the bottle. It literally just pops into space. Like, you don't have to, like, even though you know how things work, you don't have to draw out and animate and detail every single little thing, because you're going to drive yourself nuts. In this bottle, I don't really, I guess it's kind of the same. When you have like dripping things like this could be slime, this could be blood, it could be foam from a bottle. It's going to elongate. You can see it's kind of short here, gets longer, and then that tip is going to be what breaks off. And then the icicle, I guess you could say, is going to kind of retreat a little bit and then come back and ready to drop the next one. And you can see that with this too. I mean, same exact concept. We have the drip. It gets longer and that tip breaks off and goes down. Nothing too crazy. So this pot is pretty interesting, actually, as we move on to the pot. So we have the bubbles, obviously, and that's pretty simple. I'm pretty sure it's the same animation over and over again. Like, I don't think I did 3 separate bubbles for this. I think I just did 1 and offset them. Which, if you have anything repeating, especially like right next to each other, it's pretty simple. It just grows, pop. You know, like if you have torches on the wall or something like that, you know, anything where you have the same animation repeating next to each other, always offset them a little bit. Because if they're all the same, and if these were all popping at the exact same time, it would look really weird. And the smoke is actually pretty interesting. This is, it's very subtle, and you can barely see it in the final animation, but it's a very easy effect, actually. So just so you can see it a little better here, it's literally just this very faint gradient, like kind of greenish gradient that fades in both directions. But what gives it its bubble shape is this mask. And here you can really see it on this black background. And this mask is literally just this shape that I drew and did a shape tween to this shape that I also drew. Shape tweens are pretty weird. I don't use them a whole lot, but they're actually really useful. So I only have to draw 2 shapes for this. Make it a mask and shape tween between them. And this shape that I drew is going to morph into the next shape. And then I just looped it back to the first shape. And that mask will be the only thing that actually shows the gradient. On the subject of shape tweening, the shadow also uses the same effect. So we have the first shadow and then it's just tweened directly into the next shadow. So I didn't draw that transition. I just, you know, draw 2 shapes and, you know, fill in the gaps automatically. And I gotta be honest, there's not too much else to talk about as far as animation goes. There is a bird flying in the window here. There's this cat that kind of is breathing as it sleeps and wiggles its tail. The skull blinks. The owl is swaying and moving around. I guess we can talk about the owl a little bit. It's not too complicated and it doesn't look great. Another thing I might redo if I had to do this like over again. But this is where nesting symbols becomes really, really nice in things like this. And the wizard uses it a lot too, but putting symbols inside of symbols inside of symbols. And if you use another animation software, it might be called something different. But in Flash, which is what this is, it's called symbols. So the whole thing is a symbol that sways back and forth on a loop. And if we go inside that, this is where all the magic happens before the swaying. And the owl just tilts its head and kind of huffs, I guess. So pretty simple animation, but you have your nested symbols there. So that about does it. The only other thing I'll really say about this animation is I think why I like it so much is it kind of tells a little story. You know, it's only a few seconds long and there's no sound or anything, but it tells you the story of, you know, it's more than just a wizard playing the air guitar with his staff, which is what I originally had in mind. By adding the open box here and all the other staves on the wall here, which if you know your nerdy references, you might recognize some of those. You know, suddenly this cute wizard playing air guitar with his staff becomes some kind of relatable commentary on consumerism, perhaps. Buying things we don't need compulsively. Not really what I had in mind when I first made it, but I will take it. But it's like a simple little story, you know, like it's more than just a staff. You see how he got the staff, you see why he's playing air guitar. It's new, he's happy, he's excited. And soon it'll be on the wall just like all the others. So that's about all I'll say about this animation, I think. I really love doing these shorter animations, actually. They never see my YouTube, but I do put them on my social media and stuff, which you can check out if you want. Hint, hint, hint. Anyway, if you've made it this far, congratulations. I'm glad you stuck around. Not many people do, but I do appreciate you. You are awesome. As far as news for this channel goes, I'm still working on this music video, this commission, which is just about wrapped up. Probably another month, which isn't too bad. And then it's back to working on the next video for this channel, which I'm very excited about. Unless some massive commission comes out of nowhere and snipes me, which I wouldn't be upset about, but I do like putting stuff on this channel too. Always willing to do more stuff like this too. If you have any ideas or suggestions or questions or anything at all, let me know. And that is just about it for me for now. Until next time, I will see your smiling face in the next one.